everyone. Welcome to the Reelworld Trailblazer panel. I'm so excited to be moderating for you folks today. Before we start, I just want to start with a quick land acknowledgement for the land that I am on. The land on which Reelworld operates is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, and the Chippewa. Our office is located in Toronto, which falls under Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. These sovereign nations have inhabited, protected, and cared for this land since the time immemorial. We humbly acknowledge this enduring truth and our responsibilities as guests on this territory. Reelworld recognizes that European colonialism violently dispossessed many Indigenous people of their ancestral lands and continues to erase and marginalize their histories, cultures, and sovereignty. As an organization representing artists and communities from many diasporas and scattered lands, we stand in solidarity with Indigenous people in their ongoing struggles for justice and self-determination. As settlers, immigrants, or descendants of immigrants, we and our ancestors have benefited from settler colonial systems, laws, and policies that continue to occupy stolen Indigenous lands. We are committed to learning from, with, and alongside Indigenous people, and to working to dismantle white supremacy and settler colonialism in all spheres of cultural, social, and political and economic life. We invite our community to reflect on their relationships to this land, to Indigenous sovereignty, and to take meaningful action toward truth, justice, and reconciliation. So each year, the Reelworld Trailblazer Awards recognizes 6 racially diverse industry professionals who are inspiring others and blazing their own trail in the Canadian media and entertainment industry through groundbreaking and innovative work. So past recipients include Simu Liu, Fawzia Mirza, Anthony Q. Farrell, and Kelly Fyffe-Marshall. And this year, I have the privilege of moderating for you folks. My name is Vanuja, and I'm the Director of Development at Neshama Entertainment and a creative producer. I am a passionate advocate for underrepresented voices in the screen-based industry. I'm a child of immigrants and proudly born in Scarborough, Ontario. And I'm joined by our amazing trailblazers, Dalmar Abuzeid, who is a Canadian actor who's graced our screens with emotional depth and authenticity, whether it was in his breakout role in Degrassi or his award-winning work in Anne with an E. We have Humberly González, born in Venezuela. Humberly is a rising star known for her roles on The Waterfront and Ginny in Georgia. Her work on the hit game Star Wars Outlaws have earned her the Best Performance Award at the Canadian Game Awards. Kaniehtiio Horn, Kaniehtiio Horn is an actress, writer, producer, and director whose work centers on Indigenous identity and emotional complexity. Her feature directorial debut, Seeds, premiered at TIFF in 2024, garnered multiple CSA nominations. She starred in Rutherford Falls and will appear in FX's The Lowdown. Caleb Chen is an award-winning composer and producer known for his work with Netflix, Nickelodeon, CBC, and DreamWorks. He blends orchestral and contemporary styles, crafting rich cinematic storytelling, and has created nearly 250 songs, including arrangements for Beyoncé and SZA and Queen Charlotte, A Bridgerton Story. Mrinal Desai. Mrinal is a Toronto-based cinematographer known for his award-winning and Emmy-nominated work on films like Slumdog Millionaire and Court. Trained in India, he blends verite and stylized drama, capturing stories with intimacy and visual poetry. And lastly, we have Gayle Ye, who is an Emmy award-winning director of photography, recognized for their work at Cannes and Tribeca. Notable projects include Late Bloomer and Paying for It. And in 2021, Gayle became the first queer gender-fluid person of color to win a Daytime Emmy, and in 2025, 2 Canadian Screen Awards. Thank you all so much for being here. You guys are awesome. So to start, I'd first like to celebrate and relish in all of your successes. And I would like to know, what do you think has been the most rewarding part of your journey up until this point? I realize that I can't just throw it to the group because we're virtual. So I'm Mrinal, why don't we start with you?
Ask the question again.
So what do you think has been the most rewarding part of your journey up until this point?
I think personally, when you're a craftsman of a certain and an artist of a certain kind in the visual medium, you find immense pleasure in working your craft in a certain way, and then seeing it on the big screen, on the screen, and realizing that it's able to connect with people. It's able to speak to people in a certain way. And very often, in our field of films, the ideas and the the feeling of things comes from the directors, but you're entrusted with the visual language of it. And when you see that it's working in a certain way, that is immensely gratifying.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of things if we were to truly reflect and be grateful for the job, but even for at a very basic level, to be able to just make music for a living is quite amazing. I don't think I ever want to take that for granted. So every day seems like little bits of reward here and there. Obviously, it doesn't always feel like that. But beyond that, I work very closely with my brother Brian. He is my actual brother. So that working with family has always been a highlight. And doing all these projects over the years and seeing our own evolution and growth, that's been a reward. And to kind of blow it up to having a community around that. That's always been something that I have realized has been a significant part of being part of this, and to do it with people that you genuinely like. So that those things kind of combined, it makes it very worthwhile every day.
Yeah, I think working in film is such a privilege, and the main reason why I've gravitated to film is the idea of that it's a team effort always. And so I think one of the most rewarding things for me is having worked in the industry for over a decade now is growing and creating stories and with my friends, and that's really special. And so yeah, I think it's very much the community building aspect of filmmaking that has been so rewarding in my career.
Um, I feel like I agree with everything I've heard. I really enjoy, seeing the impact that the stories that we tell can have, when you get the chance to speak to someone who you never would have thought that what you were doing could affect someone else's life in that way. Sort of what Marin was saying about how it translates to the audiences, to the big screen or to the any screen. I just like when I would do Degrassi and I would see people would feel a little bit less alone, or would feel like they're seen a little bit through the people, their characters, their favorite characters. And I think that impact is, when I think about like how much enjoyment I get out of this, but that impact to me is like feels special, feels important, and an honor to have. So that's probably what's super rewarding for me.
What's been really rewarding, yeah, I agree with a lot that everyone's saying. There's teams of community and growing together. If I look back to the 10 years of my professional career when I first moved to Toronto and I was out on my own, I've gotten to see myself grow up with my art, and not everybody gets a chance to do that. And every time I look back and I see how much more open or authentic and transparent, and I kind of I get inspired with the work I get to be a part of, and then continue to push the voice and what my purpose is within it. And I think specifically the last couple years, it's becoming more and more clear why me specifically, why I'm a part of it. And I haven't been able to, go back home to Venezuela in so long, but to see how it keeps me connected to my roots and where I came from, and seeing Latinos get excited about just having some kind of connection to me or see themselves represented, it just means a lot because I miss home, and I dream of the day to be able to go back in a safe way. But this art form just keeps me connected to that. And it's really, yeah, it is a privilege, and it's really fun.
Yeah, I agree with everything everybody is saying. But I think, like, off the top of my head, I think there in the last 20 years of my career, I've seen a change in the perception of what Indigenous people look like, sound like. We come in all different shapes and sizes and colors, and I'm seeing that now reflected in casting breakdowns and in stories that are being told. We're not just being pigeonholed into the long two braid stereotype, but I've seen that all happen within my career. And also, I mean, I think the first thing that came to mind when you asked what I was the most proud of, in my movie Seeds, there's I included a lot of my own people's language, and I included Kaniehtiio Mohawk, and the film was shown at with a bunch of elders from Kahnawake, and they got to watch the movie, and I was told that some of them were, brought to tears because they heard the language on a big screen, and they were yelling back at the screen in the language and stuff. And I think that was one of the most rewarding moments in my entire career.
I think all of you have something incredible to be proud of in all of your journeys. And I'm now a little bit more curious to hear about, how your craft and creative process has evolved as you've gained more experience over the years, as all of you have your various specialties. So I'd love to start with you, Humberly.
All right. um, Gosh, a lot. I remember when I first started acting, I really thought that it was about putting on masks and putting on these characters. And I heard a lot of kind of sentences like, stepping into the character's shoes or like becoming somebody. What I've now realized is more about revealing myself, and there's a certain vulnerability that comes along with that because it's really risky, and it's something that can feel really scary to be completely naked and transparent to the people, not just when it comes out, but even on set. Having the ability to get lost in someone or a moment or a feeling, an emotion, and then there's like 50 people around you watching you. I really had to work on, this isn't to show anything. I'm trying to exist in it in the most truest form. Uh, and that takes a lot of work for me. I really had to get out of my own way. I had to kind of let my ego step to the side if it was having opinions about how good or bad it was or how it looked like, what I looked like on screen, what people were going to say about it. I was getting too far away from the purpose and like the point of me telling the story and being a part of something. So uh, the craft has grown in a way that is so self-reflective to me, where I am in life and how much I'm willing to let people in, and how courageous I am to show that and to really just embody what it means to be an artist. And to me, it's been almost like a form of therapy, honestly. I feel like every role that I say yes to that's come my way has been really aligned. And I'm very specific with what I attach myself to because I want to be able to proudly talk about it and stand behind it. And so it's been a really beautiful journey of kind of deciding what that looks like, not just with me, but with my team and the stories and the portrayal of Latino representation, if it's stereotypes, if it's inflammatory to something that I don't want to add to, and how I can also add my own flavor to that. But to know that, it means that I have to get honest with myself. So it's been really beautiful, honestly, just this journey of revealing who I really am. And I'm still figuring it out. And every year, and I think every project adds a little bit more color to what makes the mosaic of Umberly.
Yeah, I think when I started filming many years ago, just out of film school, there were lots of influences in my head because having watched this and that and interacted with this person and that person, so many different kinds of ideas. And then slowly over time, as you start working, you start letting go of all those things, and you start realizing that the secret to the thing is that you have to become very quiet and you have to learn to listen to people. And that has become the biggest um, work that I now do when I'm working on a film, is how to be quieter and quieter and listen to what is going on. Listening to the other people who are working, listening to what's happening in front of the camera, listening to what the director needs or the producers need, or all of these kind of things. And as you start becoming quieter and quieter, and it's all work that happens inside. It's not something you can show people. It's not something you can describe. You have to become silent. And the moment you start becoming silent, you start listening to things. You start hearing things which you would never have heard before. Right. And then your work starts flowering in a certain direction because now it's being guided not by an idea you have or some ego-driven kind of thing, but it's coming from what the work needs, genuinely needs at that point of time from the people. So I think if there was any broad, journey to speak of over these years, that's been the one. Of course, technically you grow, you become more and more sensitive to your craft, you become more and more sensitive to the nuances of what you're doing. That just happens naturally by experience and just by virtue of working with different people and different situations, and different colleagues, and you learn so much from different directors. But this work that's happening inside, I feel that's the real thing. That's what brings a certain kind of maturity to the work. And it's you're able to place the work in society in a good way, in a way that really genuinely helps society to grow in a better direction. That's, I think, how I would articulate it.
I think I've learned over the last 20 years, especially once I started having kids, to say no. I say no more. I'm a lot more selective. I'm sort of, I feel like I'm less kind of all over the place and like, yeah, I can play like a 95-year-old British man. No, when you come out of theater school, you're like, I could do anything. And then, but I feel like um, my uh, my kids have kind of helped me focus and like get on the right path. And I'm not saying that's what everybody needs, but it's definitely what I needed. I'm a lot more, yeah, grounded and like I think recognizing the strength that I do have and not feeling so um there was a lot of things that kind of coincided with having kids, like the pandemic and just the change even in the industry, being able to like live at home on my res rather than live in the city, and I'm able to do things like this and Zoom auditions and stuff like that. Yeah, I think I've learned how to be a lot more selective and not drive myself to insanity by saying yes to like every guest role that I get or every speaking engagement or every like every single thing that comes my way. Because I remember in the beginning of my career, and when you get out of theater school and you're like everyone's like just say yes to everything, and I'm like yes, 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 I'll do everything, just for experience. And now I'm kind of like, okay, now I think I've gotten that kind of now I think I need to apply it and just yeah, stay focused and kind of like smell the roses and enjoy life and not just be only career driven. Actually take time in the morning to just more self-care. I think I've learned that's how I think that all kind of like coincides with each other, right? So yeah, I think focusing a bit more on me as a human being, not just an actress, performer, and stuff.
I'm just soaking all that in. That's all great words that's been said. For me, I suppose as a music creator, as a composer, there's this crushing weight of the need to be original. We are credited sometimes as original music by, and then your name. So there's always been earlier in the start when I'm trying to figure out who I am, this kind of like incessant need to be different or original, which in some ways is debilitating. Um, and I remember working so hard to find that out, and I get so flustered when somebody would ask me like, "What's your voice? Like, what do you do?" And I like, I don't know. I write classical music, and then I make beats, and I just couldn't really answer that succinctly. And at some point, it started to dawn on me that like, and especially as I entered into film, that there's a story, and there's a story that needs to be told, and we enter into that story and we tell it the best way that we can, in however, with whatever means and with whatever talent that we have at that current stage in our lives. And that's helped me a lot, kind of shed that, it's almost like an insecure form of ego that needs to impose a certain voice on something that is sort of comes from a place that it just needs to be different rather than being authentic. And that's helped me kind of engineer a version of how I create that doesn't need to always be that, and whatever flows out is naturally going to be me. And it's helped my craft kind of move along and do all these diverse types of projects and all these great stories that I couldn't possibly imagine myself being able to be a part of telling. So that's been helpful. And of course, as I said, I write a lot with my brother, and having somebody there has kind of helped shaped the trajectory of that. And looking back, I wish I'd sort of start moving in that direction a little bit sooner, you could say. But at the same time, I've realized things just take time, and the natural progression of things.
Yeah, I think early in my career, I was very focused, like in terms of my cinematography, focused on making the cool shot and, maybe not looking at the big picture. And now that I'm, over a decade after that, I kind of really am thinking about the big picture. I really think cinematography should be purposeful, and that's what makes it beautiful. And I'm also cognizant of, who we're centering in the frame. And I'm also very fortunate enough to be in a position of hiring a team. And so I'm really, thinking about how do we make space behind the scenes for folks who have not always been invited in? How do I invite those folks in? So really just thinking about the impact of my work as it relates to a community versus just a cool shot for my demo reel is what I've learned in the past.
I agree with everybody again. It's going to be a lot of that today, I think. Mrinal, I'm sorry I said your name wrong earlier. I should know better. But I feel like taking care of myself has become a priority for me. I think that the battles in my head, are kind of what take a lot of my attention in these days, and don't necessarily have to. But I think it speaks to revealing myself, like being comfortable with people seeing who I am, and not trying to fit a mold, which I've been sort of chasing all my life, trying to be this guy, because that's how I think people are expecting to receive, to see me. I think during the pandemic, that was a big shift for me as well. I remember, having agreed to do a play at the start of the pandemic, and I don't know what changed. It's like when I think back to it, it's like a switch or something. But I suddenly was like aware of, how it would be received. Why were they asking me to do it? Who else was involved? Like all of these questions sort of flooded in, and when I think back to it, it's funny. I couldn't put my finger on what the problem was because no one had done anything. But I remember having the conversation with the director and explaining my thoughts, and thankfully they were receptive to them. But I just think easily, like, I could have gone another way. I could have been like shamed or guilted into like, you have this opportunity, you should say yes, because that's kind of how it's been for me all. I personally never went to theater school, so I think I always had this thing of like, you got to work, you got to work, you got to work. And that definitely served a purpose for me, as far as like, ensuring that I showed up to classes wherever I could find them, and learning from whoever, people said was the person to go to. I think that now the things that I'm looking for are inside, and growing as a person. And, you know, it's not as, black and white of like, I went to a class and I passed the class, now I'm good. Like it's sort of, it takes time. It takes time. And just, I'm kind of just proud that I, still find enjoyment in this thing. And I still, I'm willing to, I love right now. I think what keeps me going is like just meeting people, hearing their stories. That really kind of makes me realize that we're all figuring it out, and we're all on a journey rather than, we've all gotten past this line, therefore we only associate with one another or something. So I think, yeah, I think that it's a process, and right now it's about learning a bit about who I am, and continuing to it, as I always have, but I'm just more aware of it now.
We've all sort of talked about in this last theme of your creative processes, also talking about your own personal growth. And I guess in that growth, for a challenge for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, something that I think we face in our field is as you grow in accolades and success, there can be a pressure to really represent your community, and maybe speak for everybody in that community, right? Like be a pillar of representation. Firstly, how do you feel about that? Do you feel that? And then I guess the follow up to that is, how do you navigate that in this personal journey? Because you've all sort of touched on like the part of the craft, but also balancing it with your own growth. So I'm going to start.
Really great question. I will have to process that a little bit. I guess my gut reactions are, I think I spent a lot of my career, the sort of classic phrasing of like, I don't want to be known as a Chinese Canadian DP. I just want to be known as a DP. And I think I spent a lot of my career trying to fight that. And and as I realized, everything I do is Chinese Canadian because I am Chinese Canadian. Or everything I do is queer because I am queer, and that is the experience. And so once I allowed myself to just be that, that was really exciting and really freeing. And there's also the classic phrase of like queer rights, but also queer wrongs. Like let's accept our failings too. It's human. It's part of who we are. And so I think that sort of line of thinking has really helped me navigate the sort of barriers that we face. Of course, some days are harder than others, but I think holding on to that has really been my anchor through the hardships in our industry.
Yeah, it's a big question, and to be honest, I am not sure how much of a spokesperson for the community I really am in that sense of the word. It's like I don't really perceive my actions as being that, but I do get the odd, and earlier in my career, I was actually just I had my blinders on. I was just like typical kind of Chinese fashion. I kept my head down, did my work, and that was that. And I didn't really think much about the whole how it interacts with the rest of the tapestry of things. And it wasn't until a little bit further down the road I kind of poked my head up and it's like, wow, actually, you know what? People do care. And and for myself, I started feeling like I needed to seek out other voices that look like me doing that, doing the same thing that I did, which was I thought non-existent. But slowly, I've kind of pieced together those some people of an older generation and some people coming up of a younger generation, and together, I think it's the community sort of figures it out, and nobody's sort of in a space where they own the microphone, and so collectively, I think it's been a really edifying experience getting to just know stories, and for me, I prefer to kind of hear what the experiences are. I just met with a composer out in Hong Kong doing their thing out in Hong Kong. That's just completely different than how we operate here, and so the combination of those, it's the synthesis of those, I think pushes a way better story than any individual one of us do. So I'm always looking out to kind of see where those are and try to have those voices be heard in my life and in the general scope of the community as well.
Dalmar.
Yeah, so the question is like, are we being asked to represent our communities essentially? Like, how is
Yeah,
that manifesting
yeah.
in our
I
fields?
think some people, like I know for myself as an executive, I'll get like, oh, you're the first Tamil Canadian executive.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
I have so many questions for you. You represent all of us. Like, do
yeah,
you get that firstly, and then how do you navigate that and like that pressure to represent?
yeah. That's a lot of pressure, and I guess thankfully they don't ask me to say anything because that would be Wouldn't know what to say, but like a lot of my career, I think has been being the person, that one person in another space that represents, some, like, I don't know if this is true. Maybe I'm kind of pulling at straws, but like I feel like people will watch a show like Degrassi and how many people of color are on that show, and so therefore that's their idea of that whole community. When it's like that's me. I'm proud to do it. I'm definitely proud to do it, and I know that just because of how the industry is this is, at least that's been my path, is like always, I guess, having that come along with me is like that representation. And when I think back to that story around the pandemic time, that was part of why I was kind of having questions. I was like, I have to explain why I'm here. If I take this job, I have to be the person that all the questions come to about why I'm here. And that's okay, but I wasn't willing to do that for that production, if that makes sense. Like, I thought that's kind of another thing. That's another job, essentially. I saw it as like two jobs, as far as like doing the work and also having to be this do this representation. And so I think it's something that comes with any space that I walk into. Sometimes I'm ready to kind of take that on. I'm ready to kind of speak to my experience, but it not represent all people's. I think I'm a little bit, even in that sense, like as a Black man, I'm a little bit ambiguous in that I'm not Black American. I'm Black Canadian, and Black Canadian can mean so many different things. So, as I become more aware of it, I might be able to speak better to it. But as far as like, for me, all I can do is, again, speak to my experience, speak to what I know.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I kind of don't know how to answer the question, but
I feel like you did. I think,
yeah,
yeah, I think not just focusing on yourself and moving through the world as yourself is the best you can do when you don't know how to represent everybody, right? Umberly, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this question.
Yeah, it's really interesting because when I started acting, I don't think it crossed my mind that I was going to be representing my people. There's not a lot of Venezuelans in Hollywood. If anything, there was an air of assimilation because I wanted to work, and I'll be like, I'll be whoever you want me to be, and it could be any kind of Hispanic, Latino, whatever. And it wasn't until kind of halfway through all of this that I realized that if I do share my story and tell them exactly where I'm from, maybe there's an opportunity that I get to be a part of that story. And it happened almost by accident or just by simply sharing and being honest. Like my role in Ginny and Georgia wasn't ever Latina at all. I think she was based on an Italian character. Happy to play it, but I think it was a conversation I had with the creator before we went to picture, like day one, my first scene. And I was like, oh yeah, my mom's name is Sanchez, and like we're from Venezuela. And I just started sharing a bit of my story, not with any ulterior motive, but simply getting to know each other. And she just thought, well, let's use that. And instantly they just like called Netflix, changed her name, changed her backstory. They used me to kind of add a bit of detailing and add my language. And I thought, wow, if I hadn't said that, if I was too shy to share who I am and where I'm from, that would have never happened. And that show became such a worldwide thing that it's what united me to my roots. And it was something that I felt a bit estranged from, to be honest. And then it really lit a fire inside me that I was like, okay, this is great. And I love that I am more than just where I come from. I love that I've had the opportunity to play so many different kinds of characters that were not attached to my culture, my language, my roots, but I had the opportunity to share that afterward, even after I was cast, being a part of such different like franchises and worlds. And it just showed me specifically that I could be that person. I could open even doors for myself and then let everybody else in too. Especially when I was trying to be an actor in Canada. I had never even been to LA until last summer. It wasn't really something I was thinking of. There's a lot more of us out there, and starting here in Toronto, it was just a bit more the pressure of that, right? It's like, oh, is there even space for me to, because I didn't see myself represented. Um, but something that really opened my eyes, I was recently in Washington, and I was part of the National Hispanic Foundation for the Arts, and their mission is actually that it's representation of Latino voices, but beyond what we think or the world thinks we look like, um, because we are just people. We're family, we're friends, we are lovers and our professionals in our fields. We are not just, the help or the drug dealers, or those kinds of stories can be so inflammatory to like what people think Hispanic and Latinos are, and that really it left an impression in me because if you grow up watching that, that is what you believe these people are. And so now I'm like, oh, it's so my mission and my purpose to show who I am as a person first, and Latina or XYZ later. And I think that's what creates more unison, because we are currently in a time of a lot of division and who is what and who, and it's heartbreaking, but also it's the reason I am an artist, by simply existing and being true to who I am and where I come from. Whether that's the first thing you learn about me or the last thing you learn about me, I hope I can be human first. And I always lead with that.
Wow, it's really interesting to hear what everyone has had to say. Um, it's a difficult question for me, because most of my earlier career was in India, where I was the dominant majority, part of the dominant majority. So I never had to deal with issues of representation. It's only once I began filming very regularly in North America that I began to understand what these issues actually are as a lived experience for people. And then there was a period of trying to come to understand exactly what it is, become sensitive to what it is, and also forge some kind of a relationship with the issue itself. You know, and from the beginning, I was doing projects all around the world. Not just in India, but you're filming in Nairobi, in Istanbul, in Japan, and in the West, and all this kind of stuff. And as a camera person, when you're with your camera and shooting, you have to develop some kind of a connection with the people you're filming with. The people in front of the camera, the director who comes from another culture, all this. So there was always some kind of effort being made. How do you relate to all these different people, different ethnicities? What are their problems? What are their, um, uh, where is their suffering lie? And slowly, over time, you begin to understand that it's actually global. It's universal. The human condition is universal. Right. It's just this form or that form in this cultural context or that cultural context. It just takes on different shapes. Right. So this, like what Humberly said, is finally it boils down. You begin to realize, how do I relate to this person as a human being? Whether it's from this, whether the person has this problem or that problem, their suffering and their pain, which is usually what our films are addressing in some way or the other. What you're trying to do is capture that or show it in a very compassionate light or show it with love or something like that. It's about that human condition of suffering. And so I don't know whether I've ever had to, represent my community or something like that, but I feel it's very, as soon as I reached this position of being able to look at everything as a universal condition, my relationship with it became very easy and very comfortable. I could shoot anything. I could relate to anybody or anything, no matter where they come from. And the specificities are lost on me sometimes, but it's only by interacting with someone. What is the migrant experience? What is the indigenous experience? Recently I shot a film which was at Hot Docs, which was about the entire history of the LGBTQ movement in Canada. Starting from the '60s onwards. It was fascinating. So I learn a lot in this way, but my relationship with that ends up always being at the level of one human being to another, and I find that very, very rewarding. And then I can take a stand and a stance on everything also, not just through my camera, but also as a human being. I know how to relate. I don't know if it answers your question, but that's been kind of my journey in relating to this subject. Yeah.
Yeah, when I first graduated theater school, I was like, I'm never going to play an Indigenous person. Like, I just knew that. I just thought that. I just was told that. I'm a blue-eyed, light-skinned Indigenous person, even though I was raised in the Longhouse, grew up traditionally, raised in Kahnawake. My mom's a first language speaker. It was not what Hollywood, presented us as. I don't look like the stereotype. So I never thought I would have to represent an entire people. And then slowly, as there was more and more Indigenous filmmakers out there making decisions and stuff, I started getting cast as an Indigenous person. I mean, they could real recognize real. Like they were like, oh yeah, we know, like the second I open my mouth, and so I didn't enter the industry thinking that I was going to have to like represent an entire people, but then the more and more the industry started to know me as an Indigenous person, so then I started like going out for these roles and getting cast in some of these roles, and sometimes sometimes I would be literally the only Indigenous person, and then I'd be like sitting on set and I'm like, why is there this thing hanging in the window when, these people are actually like Anishinaabe, but there's like all of this, or they'll like be referencing some like deep West Coast thing, or they'll like, I'll suddenly have to be the cultural advisor. I'll have to be the language expert. I have to be the wardrobe, like designer for the character. I have to be, and so all of these like things, I couldn't just focus on my craft really. And so but then that was like a lot in the beginning, and then the more over the last 20 years there's been a lot more Indigenous people, like I said, making decisions. There's a lot more um, there's a lot more of us. It's not just like me and like Sarah Podemski. Like I could literally, when there would be like an Indigenous role breakdown come out, I'm like, it's gonna be like, nope, Sarah's on a show right now, so it could either be me or this other person. And like now there's more of us, and there's we're not all fighting for the one role that is coming out, which is like really nice. And then I was just casting on a few things, like even when we were trying to cast Shorzy in the beginning, I was blown away by how many Indigenous women were auditioning for this thing. I was like, oh my gosh, like under 30 is thriving. So I've noticed the changes. There's still like ways to go and everything. I never thought I would have to represent my people, let alone like the entire Indigenous population of North America sometimes, but there's been like growing pains too, like with my reps and stuff. I had to sort of tell, like they've learned with me, like as we go. I'm like, don't put me out for like a Cheyenne warrior pre-contact. I'm I'm not like a pre-contact Indigenous person, and yeah, I think the pressure is the pressure is always there, I will say, especially as an Indigenous person, no matter what industry you're in, whether or not you're in, the entertainment industry, or my sister's an athlete, but like you're somehow having to represent everybody, and that means you should be on, your best behavior, etc. Which sometimes leaves us no room to fuck up, to make mistakes, which is human. It's human to make mistakes, and it's human to, I think I did feel like I think maybe up until 5 years ago, I didn't like, once I realized like, oh my God, there's a lot of pressure on me. Now I am the only Mohawk person doing this, or the only Indigenous person doing this. I didn't like it, I'm like, I'm messed up. Like I have issues that I have to deal with. Like, don't take me for like everybody else. And then I think now I'm like, almost 40. I'm like a little bit more relaxed and chill. And I love saying like, you know what? You don't want me for this. Why don't you there's this person, this person, this person, this person. Why don't you ask them? They're more of the expert, or they're the people that would know, or they're the right age, or they're the right, nation or something. I'm so much like, I'm not trying to take every role and every opportunity. I'm just sort of like, here, like there's all these other people. Why don't let's like share the wealth kind of thing. Yeah, so I hope that answers the question a little bit.
It does. No, it totally does. I think, I really appreciate all of you putting so much thought into that question, because I think with the scarcity mindset of being Black, Indigenous, and people of color in our industry, I know that pressure exists, and I think hearing it from you folks is going to really impact everybody watching. So I really appreciate that. The last question that I think we'll have time for, and this one's a little juicy, but in terms of, the Canadian film and television industry has changed a lot over the years. And, with the help of festivals and programs like Real Worlds, there have been a lot of great change. But what are some barriers to access that you think still exist? And what would be, I guess, your proposed solution if you have one? And you may not have one, and that's totally okay. Yes, Kaniehtiio, I was actually going to point to you first, so please go for it.
For me, I keep saying, like, when people ask me a question like this, I keep saying, it's great. We have more Indigenous people in front of the camera. We have more Indigenous people writing. We have more Indigenous people, producing. I want to see more Indigenous people in the sound room, editing suite. I want more Indigenous people, we need to encourage them to get in every department, PR people, agents, like all of these other realms. I think, like when I made my film Seeds, that was really, really important to me. I accessed this sector development fund from the Indigenous Screen Office, and I was able to, because we shot in Northern Ontario, and I'm from Kaniehtiio, which is near Montreal. So we were in like Ojibwe territory. I'm just looking at my child, make sure she's not like eating a small toy. But so we accessed this funding so I could bring 4 people from my res up to Northern Ontario to like get them in to, as trainees and stuff. And that was really important to me. And the union was actually really cool about it. IATSE was, and then they were like, you guys can like totally join the union, but we were also like, well, they live in Quebec, like how would this translate? Like they don't also speak French. It was just like all this. I think if there's more I don't know, like programs with like some of the guilds and like to bring in more Indigenous people or just people of color, just more people in the world in those, like those departments and stuff. I'd love to see more of that. I'd love to, like, it's wonderful to have a whole bunch of more actresses now, actors and stuff, but I really want to fill up the other spaces, because having those people, like when I was shooting Seeds and having some of the trainees there, like just being able to keep an eye on little things that you think that wouldn't matter. Like one of our blankets was upside down and it has like the Five Nations flag on it, but it was upside down, and one of the trainees like pointed it out, and we were like, see, I have 8 million other things I'm thinking about, I couldn't see that, and so I think I want to encourage more of the guilds and I don't know, even like the agents and stuff to like, let's, it's helpful to have one of us on your team. There's a shorthand, there's an access too. A lot of people contact me because they're like, well, you have access to all of these people, and I'm like, okay, but I'm not a casting director. Like, are you gonna give me a fee? So yeah, I think that's my quick answer to that.
Um, we gotta for me, it starts with us and the community, and I think it's about bringing people along, especially with being like Hispanic Latina. There can still be a lot of cliques and weird division within our own communities of like, what kind of Latino are you, and if you were first generation, if you emigrated, if you have a different accent. And it isn't just Mexico, and there are so many countries in Latin America that are underrepresented, and I think it starts with like looking around us and bringing those young actors in, bringing those like unique voices in and creating, because the reason we are not seeing the representation of like an accurate depiction of what Latin America is because it isn't being told from an authentic voice, or they're being repeated, or they're the same stories over and over. So I would love to, I mean, for me, if I'm putting myself in the hot seat, it's like, you should talk about how you grew up, what are your people doing, and create with friends, and but bring them along. It's this like kind of being keeping it to yourself because there's not a lot of it. But I mean, here in Canada, I was like the only Latina I saw. It was like me and two other girls too, and like it's grown so much. And I have a lot of Latino friends who have not gotten like opportunities, whether that's because um, they haven't done enough or been given a chance to, or because they sound like too Latino and their sound is different. I'm like, I want to see more accents on screen. I want to see different sounds. And so, but something I've been hearing lately, it's like, how do we unify like the Latino community more, so that people know how different we all are? Because I still have like like blonde, blue eyes, green eyes. Like we're not all like dark skin, um, and so it's really interesting that I think when people keeps asking this question, they're like, bring your friends along, open doors for them, introduce them to people, encourage them, share the secret, the advice. And I think when we do it together, we're just stronger in numbers. And um, I think those stories will come to the surface naturally. And because we're actually speaking to each other, we're not just like waiting for the phone to ring. So, yeah, I think it's just literally get together, share your stories, get inspired, make a rom-com that doesn't have to do about like suffering and all of this.
Yeah, I think an issue I've seen in our industry is, you know, especially as it pertains to racialized folks, is an assumption of inexperience. And as I sit here with these lovely trailblazers and even a future trailblazer in the back there, maybe, is that we are experienced and we are established. And so, you know, what I've tried to do as I'm bringing on mentees to set or someone who's shadowing me on set is I don't just introduce them as, hey, this is the person who's shadowing me. I say, hey, this is actually a really seasoned gaffer who's really interested in becoming a DP. And so they have a good level of lighting stuff. They're just a little bit interested in camera, just to set the tone. Or, you know, really hype up your mentees, hype up the people that you're introducing to these folks. Because I want to start to, you know, unpack that misconception about us is that, oh, we're either a handout or a charity case or whatever it may be. All those awful types of thinking. And I think that starts with ourselves as leaders and how do we introduce others in a way that's really impactful and meaningful.
Amen to all that. And I think part of uh, what I'm not good at, being out there and be like, we need change. This is how we're gonna do it. Like I don't have that sort of big macro scale of a vision, but within just community building, getting emails hit, people come by and I have them in a studio just a shadow, and then off they go. And part of that, it's like we spend half the time talking about just self advocacy and I think a lot of us kind of grow up with this idea that, oh, I don't know, maybe I'm here to just check a box. And so much of this work is not just a craft, but how you advocate for yourself in the world and move about. And I think a lot of younger folks, myself included, like it's hard to walk into a room and demand a sort of presence and to be seen a certain way. But coaching through that, I think it's started to make some waves. And you're totally right. Like there's not a lot of people that look like all of us in the post-production world, but at the same time there's a lot of us doing the work that doesn't get seen as well. Um, so it's balancing those two and bringing those things to light. And like my agent that I work with, he's really good. Our whole roster is diverse, and he's one of the few that kind of in the space that moves that way. And I feel like um, my personal work is to kind of be with the community and make sure that when they get the call, they feel ready. And that's half the battle. That's most of it there. When you feel ready, you're ready to go. And that's you're gonna.
Yeah, this is a tough question to answer for me. I agree with what everyone is saying. I think like what Kaniehtiio was saying, that like if there are, people who understand, where I'm coming from in different on different sides of the industry, say they were directors or they were agents or they were casting directors, I feel like that would have a huge impact. I wonder, like for actors that are, like the younger generation coming up, like what is their experience of casting rooms? What is their experience of like the types of roles they're being asked to read for? Sometimes they ask, me to read roles that have nothing to do with my identity, but because it's like, you're black, so this is the umbrella that you fit under. So I think that if there were more people in those departments, that were working at all levels on a set, that would bring just like this that would make the experience, like I would feel a lot more seen on those sets. Like I'm only now in like the later years of, like not later, but I mean like currently, like I'm only now starting to be on sets where I see, a black director. Well, maybe sometimes I've seen black directors, but yeah, like more black directors. I've been on sets where the cast is all black. Like it's only now that I'm seeing that, and I'm starting to understand, like, I don't have to explain something, or I don't have to, when I'm trying to explain myself, I don't have to, I don't know. There's a bit more of a like I'm there's less restrictions. It's hard to explain, but like I can just kind of be myself. Like not my like I can just sort of express myself without, you know wondering how I'm being received. Yeah, yeah. I guess code switching. It might be, maybe that's what it is. Like it. So that's one thing I would like to see more of. Selfishly, I would love if we could, continue to try to work towards a star system in Canada that doesn't involve us having to, depending on how we, if the opportunity comes, we go where the work takes us. But like, I would like for stories to continue to get made here. And I do feel like, when I was auditioning at the time, kind of like what Humberly was saying, it would be me, or there'd be like one other person. And because of that scarcity thing, it's like, it took me years to realize I don't even say hi to this guy. Like, I don't even, you know what I mean? And how similar are we when we do get to talking? It's like, because otherwise we're just like silos. And I realized, like, my goodness, you've just been living this thing in the same rooms as me. And I never kind of thought to just say hi, you know what I mean? Because it was always in an audition room. And I feel like now the generation coming up has a little bit, I mean, pandemic has kind of switched things up but I do see a lot more community, and I do see stories that are very specific being told. It's not just the black hetero, big strong guy that I'm seeing on screen. That's kind of my own things that I've been battling with. But like, that's not the only story I'm seeing now. There's much more, variety. Um,
100%.
so we're moving in
Mrinal,
that direction, and
sorry.
that's what I hope for. Sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry. I thought you were done, so I was going to throw it to Mrinal.
Please do.
Oh, sorry. Mrinal. Yeah, I'd love for you to answer this question before we wrap up.
Yeah, so I think I'm much more recent in Canada. I have a lot less experience over here, and also I think I work in with very boutique projects where the filmmakers and the people working are already highly sensitized and putting together a diverse kind of crew all the time. So I've never really run into this, and I've never felt any barriers for myself. But one thing I do know is, just in your own way of relating with this, the sheer fascination that you can have when you have a diverse uh, kind of crew to work with, who brings so many different things to the table, which you'll just never have if it's like a homogeneous thing. That just having that sheer fascination inside you just transmits to other people, and you end up actually making choices which go in that direction. In all the projects I've done here, that's always been the case. And you actually choose sometimes to have, oh, let's hire this person, let's have this, let's do this in this kind of way, just to be able to build something which is much bigger than what a very narrow kind of almost like a boxed in point of view would be. That's where how I kind of relate to this thing. There is genuinely a sheer fascination with just the fantastic diversity that exists and is available for us here.
And folks, I'm so sorry to say we're at the end of our time, which I really enjoyed hearing all of you speak about your experiences so vulnerably and honestly. And I can obviously very clearly see, and I'm sure everyone watching will see, why you are the Trailblazer cohort for 2025. Congratulations again on being award recipients. And it's been my pleasure and honor to be able to chat with you today. So thank you guys so much.